My name is Pete Schramm. I'm the Vice President of the Elvehjem Neighborhood Association. And thanks for joining us this evening. Normally, it's an election year, as it seems to always be in Wisconsin nowadays. And normally, this time of year, we would be hosting an election forum for the candidates vying to be the District 16 alder representing the Elvehjem neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods. This year, we only have one candidate, and it is current incumbent Alder Sean O'Brien, who was elected last year. One of the things that is different about the city council this year is that rather than all of the seats being up every 2 years, they have staggered them so that half the seats are up one year, half the seats are up the other year. This is the first year they did that. So Sean got the wonderful ability to be one of the first people to have to run immediately again after being elected. So instead of doing that, what we decided was to bring you an opportunity to just talk about issues that we would talk about in an election forum, but more in just a comfortable fireside chat. I apologize for my lack of fire. Our one candidate, Alder Sean O'Brien, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And thank you to Dan and Pete and everybody from the Elvehjem neighborhood. It's been truly wonderful to get to work with you over the last, what is it, 9 months now? So thank you for having me tonight.
So, Sean, you did get put in a really kind of weird position in that you ran and had to get ready to go and then had to run again. What was the first year, your kind of inaugural year on the council like?
Yeah, I mean, the year has gone by both so fast and so slow at the same time. It's been a whirlwind of a year. After I was elected, I was told it is going to be one of the steepest learning curves that you are going to have, even though you've worked in government. And wow, were they correct on that? And I feel pretty comfortable in government. But the city's a really big place. And I know that sounds like cliche. Yes, it is geographically a big place, but the city agencies are huge, and we have a lot of really truly incredible employees that work for the city, who do a lot of really, really good work. But also there's a lot of issues that, pop up on the day-to-day basis, that it's a puzzle to figure out, okay, so we have this manhole cover that's been cracked. Where do I go to fix that? It's kind of some of that like bureaucracy that you wouldn't necessarily think about, but there is a specific person at the city who is designed to fix that broken manhole cover. Or if we need a trash can in a park or by a bus stop, like that's like there is a specific person. And so the first year has been a lot of like learning, kind of like where do I go? How do I go and get things done and deliver it for the constituents that need it? I also think one of the things that I learned pretty quickly is this job is not necessarily about fixing like the big sexy issues of, that we hear about in the news. It's about really fixing and solving the day-to-day issues that, make life better for people on the far southeast side of Madison, and that could be, there's a crack in my sidewalk, or, I do need a trash can. Actually, trash cans are one of the things that I deal with the most in this job. Or, hey, there's a down tree branch, or I have a parking question, or I need to get my permit for building done. Can you help me navigate those systems? So, that's been one of the things that it's really been learning kind of those paths. So,
It does sound like a lot.
yeah.
When you talk about the steep learning curve, were there any of those lessons that like really surprised you that you just kind of didn't expect? Like you knew, like you said, you had a general sense of government, you had a general sense of like you knew you were getting into a bureaucracy. But was there any of those things that you found particularly surprising that just no one would have expected?
I think the speed at which government works and how fast and again how slow it can be. There are some processes that I'm like, why is this so slow? Why is this so hard? And yet also there are some processes that go by just really quickly. And it's being able to like pace yourself, and really make sure that, when we're talking about a big ordinance change, that we're dotting all of the I's and crossing all of the T's, meeting with stakeholders and, partners and people in neighborhoods So District 16 is the biggest district by landmass in the city. I have 12 neighborhood associations in my district, and I have 14 parks, which is a lot. It can kind of, if there's traffic, it can take me like a half an hour to get from one end of my district to the other, whereas some people can walk from one end of their district to the other in a half an hour. So the issues that face District 16 are really, really unique. And they're not the same from the top of my district to the bottom of my district. And, they're very, unique to each individual area. And that requires some mental shifting and, being able to real time go from this area needs this in a residential area to we also have one of the largest industrial areas. How do we meet the needs of both of those? And sometimes they can be at conflict and, sometimes they go well together.
Well, and that leads into what, so was that one of the biggest challenges you had to face in that not only were you getting used to everything, but you were getting used to everything in a way that is wildly spread out. So when you were looking at the earliest challenges you were facing, what were those?
Yeah. Again, I think it's really making sure that I'm getting back to people in as fast of a manner as I can while also trying to fix their problems and balance that like I am learning in this first year. And also, I really do genuinely want to solve your problem as fast as possible. I would say that was probably one of the biggest challenges that I faced. And also facing the fact that many of the issues that we are dealing with as a city are really, really, really complex. And on the surface, it can seem like there's a black or a white, yes or no. But then you start hearing from neighbors and your constituents and stakeholders from across the city, and their opinions vary. And oftentimes you find yourself in kind of a gray area, and you do have to make a black or a white call when it's really kind of more of a gray issue, and you need to, make the issue into one of the two options that you have in front of you, which is either yes or no. And that can be tricky and it can be frustrating, both to me and also to the residents. But I think we've done a good job of walking that balance. But we still have a lot more work to do because, like I said, it's only been 9 months.
So, from the time frame, as we start to get into like some of the more specific issues, the overriding issue that can't help but its tendrils affecting everything else, of course, is budgeting. Is how are we spending money, and especially in an era where it seems like nobody can afford anything anymore.
Yeah.
How much of the budget process have you gotten through, and like how have you experienced engaging with it?
Yeah. So when I was sworn in, the budget process was already underway for last year's, or for I guess this year's budget, but we tackled it last year because we're kind of always looking one year ahead. So we were already partially through that budgeting process because that's starting right now. City departments and city agencies are submitting their requests to the mayor's office and starting to kick off the budgeting process already. And so, the budget is a huge document. It's thousands of pages long, and you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. You're also talking, I could nerd out about this a little bit, but you're talking, you have the capital budget, which is, the fixed services and or the fixed, infrastructure, your infrastructure projects, and then you have the operating. And those two are very different. And learning what fits into capital and what fits into operating. And so when I got in, we started hosting a series of budget listening sessions at the city. I want to say we hosted 6 of them, on different issues, from public safety to housing to transportation. And we invited the public to those, and it was really interesting to see which ones were really well attended and which ones weren't as well attended. And also the almost lack of attendance at some of them. Some of them I would expect, there to be dozens of people and there would be 6 people that would show up. And I was also expecting dozens of emails to be coming in about the budget. And I did get a lot of emails, don't get me wrong. I did get probably a couple hundred about it, but I was expecting a lot more. And so I think that's one of the things that I've been really trying to focus on in this upcoming budget cycle is how can we engage the neighborhoods a lot more in the budgeting process and really trying to figure out unique ways to reach residents and neighbors where they're at in the budgeting process. And you're right. I mean, we continue to face structural issues with city funding and tight budgets. And I mean, costs continue to rise, both for housing, for city operations, but also for things that unfortunately the city can't control, like groceries and gas prices. You know, I feel it every day. I just went to the pump this morning to fill up, and I was like, wow, that was crazy expensive. And there are certain things that the city can address. And there are certain things, unfortunately, like groceries and gas that we're just not able to tackle.
When you're looking at the budget, when they drop this massive document in front of you, because one of the kind of truisms you hear a lot are everyone loves the idea of spending less money until you start actually saying the things you're going to not spend money on. When you're looking at it, how do you kind of balance that? Like, we know that we need to be careful with this, but like, what kind of just how do you look at that, knowing like this would be nicer if it was smaller, but these programs are all real and they all do affect people?
Yeah. I mean, I ran for office because my parents were pushed out of their house because of the cost of housing in Madison. You know, they're retired, they're living on a fixed income, and they had to sell my childhood home because property taxes were going up at such a rate. And that's something that has really stuck with me is witnessing my parents have to, navigate that process and downsize because they couldn't afford their home. And I'm also feeling that squeeze, that financial pressure. I just got my property taxes this year, and wow, did they go up? And so for me, that's kind of the baseline where I start is we cannot continue to ask residents to face these massive property tax increases because we can't necessarily continue to afford that. And yet costs for basic city services continue to rise. And so we're going to have a cost to continue budget going into this next year. But one of the things that I did in this last budget cycle, knowing that we needed to be responsible, and this is going to get kind of into a nerdy budgeting topic here, so my apologies, and if you need me to re-explain it, I'm happy to do so. But we have general tax levy, which is what funds the city, and then we have our kind of like our rainy day amendment additions to the budget to be paid for out of the rainy day fund, kind of that general fund, rather than property tax levy, because I wanted to make sure that we were being responsible with our tax dollars and not asking residents to continue to pay more. And so I was one of the authors of that amendment to shift that to make sure that we were reducing tax burden on residents in the last budget. And I look forward to finding new ways similar to that to reduce costs for residents.
One of the costs you brought up, of course, housing, which is you can't open the State Journal or any local newspaper without talking about downtown housing, building housing. Um, we know it's expensive right now. You can't buy a house in Madison without it being 350, $400,000 for what would have been considered a starter home 10 years ago. What how do you navigate? Because there's always the battle between people have different feelings about how you should build in neighborhoods. People on different sides of town have different opinions. First, how do you navigate all that? And second, what do you think there isn't going to be a silver bullet, but what kind of things can you see addressing in the next couple of years to work on that problem?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've started to make some really strong headway, and I think we're seeing that in the latest housing snapshot report shows that we are making headway, and yet we also still do have some glaring holes in our housing network that we need to fulfill. One for renters, we need to increase the vacancy rate, and that is just simply going to be by building more housing. Our vacancy rate was sitting at like 1 or 2%. Kind of a healthy vacancy rate is about 6 to 7, and in some areas we're seeing 4%, and in some areas we're still seeing 1%. And so we need to continue to address that vacancy rate in order to stabilize stabilize rent prices. But we also need to be, looking at building more single family homes of all types, whether it is your small, high quality single family home, or also whether it is some of the larger, more expensive homes that will allow kind of some of that more costly burden of housing to be taken up by building those. So we need to be looking at and building all types of housing, and I think the city has been taking steps with the Housing Forward agenda that's been being done kind of in several packages this year to allow flag lots and accessory dwelling units and to reduce the size of lots. I think we've started to take some steps, but we still need to continue to make it easier to build housing and then make it easier to stay in housing through programs that reduce utility costs and other programs like that.
Do you think you refer to the like the changes that allowed for like accessory homes and whatnot? Do you think because we do still need people to build the new houses, are there ways for the city to incentivize that you think are doable the next couple of years that you would point to and go, this is a strategy we would have?
Expanding the Affordable Housing Fund is really important. We invested about $14 million into the Affordable Housing Fund, and we've seen this slow investment each year getting a little bit bigger, and we've seen that it's paying off. And that we need to continue to do that, and we need to continue to look at our zoning and our land use applications to make it easier to kind of build all of the types of housing that we need to do. And so it's going to be we've done some of the big things, and now it's going to be starting to get into the really nitty gritty, the zoning changes, the land use application changes, and then also we need to find ways to make it easier and more like even for builders and contractors to understand the housing process, to understand the permitting process, to be able to go through the Urban Design Commission and through Plan Commission and things like that to make it just easier for them to go through it. Because when there's uncertainty, it makes it harder to build housing. And I think also folks who are, if you've built a kitchen addition or, you tried to remodel your house, you know that the permitting process is not necessarily the easiest.
From as much as we talk about housing, there is the unhoused population, and it seems to be we had Dairy Drive over in our neck of the woods the longest time. It seems to be sometimes the unhoused population gets caught in like a very strange kind of unpleasant shell game nowadays. What do you see happening right now, and what are some ways that you think this could be continue to be addressed? Because right now it always just seems like we throw something at a problem, and then when it burns out, we have to think of a new thing.
Yeah. We need to make sure that we're addressing this. It's an issue that is going to continue to rise and get bigger. And I mean, we're seeing unfortunately, historic levels of folks using our shelters. I think the last number that I saw was like 395 people were using the shelter at Zaire Road, and that is a massive jump in the number of people that the city was expecting to be facing needing that shelter. And so, the city made and I supported a historic investment of more than $3 million to start addressing the homelessness crisis and invest in the purpose-built shelter on Bartolon Drive. But we are seeing that is not enough. That shelter only houses 250 people. And if we're seeing almost 400 people, there's a gap there for 150 people who need beds at night and who need shelter and food. And so we really need to make sure that we're finding ways to address that. And I know that our partners at the Community Development Division and community partners kind of across the city are working hard on that. And I would encourage our partners at the county to also continue to invest in the permanent shelter. And hopefully we can get that to be 24/7 through some more historic investments by the county.
When you bring up the county, this is a kind of an interesting one. How do you when you run into projects like that, how have you navigated? Because you're one part of a very tangled web of bureaucracies. You have county work, you have city work, there's a state government. I've been told there's still a federal government. There's all these different levels and they all plug in very, very strange ways. So when you get into one of those places where it's a city, you as a city council member are interacting with the county, what have you found with those relationships and how are the best ways to work through those?
Yeah, I mean, District 16 has so many different levels of government that like run through it. I mean, we have the city, we have the county, we have state highways, we have federal highways, we have federal buildings in District 16, we have the county running the landfill. There's a lot of different levels of government, and it starts with having the honest and the hard conversations and sitting down with folks. And I've made sure to, I attend county board meetings virtually when I can. I listen to their committees. The county board knows how to reach me, and I've definitely reached out to them directly on issues that are, whether it was the Humane Society or whether it was Dairy Drive. And then also, I have regular meetings with folks at the state level. I've really made sure to work hard to be lobbying our state legislative partners and meeting with them on a regular basis. I just met with a handful of bipartisan legislators a couple of weeks ago to make sure that we have that clear communication. And then also, it's making sure that we have communication with the municipalities surrounding us. We've been working on the intergovernmental agreement with the Village of McFarland, and that's been, having a lot of, you know, intergovernmental conversations between the McFarland Village Board and myself, and then also talking to some of our county board supervisors and city staff, and making sure that we have that clear, constant communication. And I would say that's really where it starts, is just that basic level of let's have those hard conversations. Make sure that, folks from the neighborhood are aware that those conversations are happening. And maybe let's have a public information meeting or two. I mean, I think we had, was it 5 public information meetings about the Madison McFarland intergovernmental agreement, which is a substantial number of them. We also have that, with the Glacier Drumlin path extension. We've had that. There was one that the county hosted as well that I made sure to attend, because I think that's important, is making sure that just because it's a different body of government, that government is still very much impacting the residents of District 16, and I try to make sure to show up when I'm able to.
We all and you segued very nicely into one of the most specific topics and we'll bounce back and forth between the larger ones and the smaller ones. But you had commented right up top that you originally thought about you all run for office under grand plans, maybe slightly short of save the world, but save the area. And then it's down to manhole covers and those sorts of things. But I know the glacial drumlin extension it's been thought about forever, as near as I can tell. So what can you tell us about where that is and like what the future of that looks like over the next couple of years?
Yeah, so actually, this was really exciting. The Glacial Drumlin Path extension is on its way, and it's going through the Board of Public Works, and the Transportation Commission just approved it. And so it'll be a section of the Glacial Drumlin Path. Will start at Vondran Road and connect to Highway AB or Buckeye. And then it'll go, and then the county will pick it up from there. And then the county project will run. And so we are doing a coordination with the city and the county to kind of build. The whole city project will be complete. I think it's supposed to start in 2027. And then, we're going to try to build it in tandem with the county so that they can get their section, and it'll start to complete a really major missing link of the Glacial Drumlin Capital City Trail, and try to finally finish that. But, that project, it was tricky because we also had to negotiate with the railroads to make sure if we had railroad crossings that we needed to be in, getting easements from the railroad and also the utilities that kind of run into that area. But I'm excited to say that that project will be starting in 2027 should everything go smoothly.
I personally share excitement as a bicyclist. For those who joined us who may not know the full scope of it, the Glacial Drumlin connection is one of the missing parts of what is intended to be a bike trail that runs across the width, I suppose, of Wisconsin from La Crosse to Milwaukee. And we've always had the little gap between the Cap City Trail and where Glacial Drumlin begins out in Cottage Grove. Another one of those city, county, state areas that has come up a lot, and we've had meetings and multiple times, is the continued restructuring of Highway 51 and the conversations about that. I know that is an element where the state very much has the head of that, and we kind of have to poke at it. How are you engaged with that, and what kind of things do you know about that whole tangle?
Yeah, I'm very engaged in it because I see this as a once in kind of a generation opportunity that we have to get right to make sure that we're building strong, resilient, connected, safe neighborhoods, and making sure that our children who are, going to La Follette and Senate are able to cross Stoughton Road safely. I don't think I need to say that anybody who's driven down that road doesn't necessarily enjoy it and finds it dangerous and fast, and some of the intersections are really terrible, and you can sit there for like what feels like 7 minutes at a time. And so, you know, that is a state-controlled highway, and so they ultimately have the final say. But myself, Alder Martinez Rutherford, and Alder Field are the three alders that it kind of runs through our districts. And we've been in very close communication with the Department of Transportation, the City Department of Transportation, and also the Wisconsin Department of Transportation. They've hosted a couple of public information meetings. I've been at those. There's going to be another public information meeting coming up in April, where they're going to April or May, and they're going to present their kind of preferred design, or kind of the next steps towards their preferred design. And the city is pushing for a wide boulevard option so that we can make sure that we have housing and also access to the businesses that are on, Stoughton Road, because we've heard regularly from folks, one, that they want their children to be able to cross to La Follette and Senate safely. That's one of the biggest things that I hear on an everyday basis. And two, that the business owners want to maintain access to the road, make sure that it is strong access, and make sure that they have strong visibility on the road, and making also sure that we're moving traffic in a safe way, and that we're also moving our pedestrians and our bikes in a safe manner as well. So we're kind of looking at like a decade horizon here, potentially, with some of the early plans coming in probably, later this summer. And then, construction probably starting, hopefully, 2030. But I know this has been a conversation that has been happening for literally decades. So we'll see if the state finally starts pushing through on this one.
When you describe the city's preferred strategy as wide boulevard, what do you have an example of, because we know what Highway 51 looks like. What would the wide boulevard be more like if there's another street in Madison, or just kind of an example of how that would change it?
Yeah, I think the closest example would be East Wash, asterisk, but better. Yeah, and I think that asterisk, but better is really important. I think that's probably the safest or the closest comparison that you can make, because we're really envisioning housing and amenities and walkability kind of in that area, but also the ability to move cars in a fast, safe, reliable manner.
Adjacent to Highway 51, but I know one of those like second order effects. We've certainly gotten questions from people who have noticed that the building that formerly known as Kuko's is now the field currently known as Dirt. So, what do you know about those like kind of smaller things that might have second order effects from the Highway 51? Like, what's going on with that, and also just
Yeah, I mean, good news. One, they finally put down grass seed, so it's not just the field known as dirt; it's the field known as grass seed and hay, I guess. So I hope that that comes through quickly. But yeah, so Kuko's closed a couple of years ago, and then that is a property that is owned by Quick Trip, and they received some building inspection complaints about the safety and quality of the building, and so they decided to tear it down, and it will be returned to a grassy field for the time being. And that project is going to depend on what happens to Stoughton Road, because some of the design ideas for Stoughton Road that Wisdot is proposing would have a road running straight through that property. And so it's going to depend on, what Stoughton Road and what WISDOT ultimately ends up deciding for that area and how they're going to provide connection onto Stoughton Road and what that intersection design ultimately ends up looking like. So I wish I had a better answer that, like, yeah, there's going to be a building that goes there, but for right now, after talking with the folks who own it, which is Quick Trip, it will be returned to a grassy field that they'll maintain for the time being.
Another question, kind of along at least the transit routes, was we got a couple of questions around Madison Metro.
Mhm.
Um, Partly from the larger perspective of like what is happening with Madison Metro, how is ridership? What are we seeing kind of as the city level, as the BRT has been kind of more integrated and become more commonplace? But then that also leads to the Elvehjem neighborhood is not terribly well served from bus systems. As a occasional rider of the C2 myself, it is not terribly accessible to downtown. So kind of that question in two parts is what are you seeing in the conversations about how Madison Metro is operating right now? And then what do you see as potential coming forward, especially for us out here on the east side?
Yeah. So I've sat down almost immediately after they were hired with Jamie Acton, who's the new Metro General Transit Manager, and also Christoph Spieler, who's the city's Director of Transportation, to kind of talk about what does the future of Madison Metro on the southeast side look like, and making sure that we do have strong bus access. The C2 goes right outside of my house, and I do ride it on a regular basis. So I feel you on the need for more bus amenities and regular bus routes. And I do know that Madison Metro is currently doing a study and going to be generating a report card on ridership, timeliness, quality of the trips, and just kind of doing a full system report card that I think will inform a lot of kind of where the investments and the changes that Metro needs to make. Whether that is more inter-neighborhood service or whether that is improving, bus stop amenities. I do know that the C lines are kind of the next category of most ridden buses outside of the new BRT lines. And so, I think that if there is going to be an investment, it might be in the C1 or the C2 lines, and we're just gonna have to kind of wait and see what the Metro report card is looking like. But in the Southeast Area Plan, I have really pushed to make sure that we have stronger amenities at bus stops and highlight that as a need for riders is stronger bus stop amenities, stronger service out here, and then kind of moving away from the Elvehjem neighborhood, but getting down into the Owl Creek, Lost Creek, Secret Places neighborhood. They have the L bus line, and that is a bus line that is often running the most late, the most in like disconnected from the city. And so I'm also working on trying to figure out how can we make that bus line more reliable for the folks in the southern part of the district, which is also one of the fastest growing areas of the district with industrial needs and making sure that we're connecting those neighborhoods down there as well.
When you bring up the Southeast Area Plan, which we've heard a lot about, we've had many meetings. For people who have been to those meetings and are kind of curious, okay, we've had a lot of plans, we've looked at quite a few posters on easels. What starts to happen now with the next like year, whether it's transit? How does that plan continue to develop, and what will we kind of see as the second order effects of it?
Yeah. So the area plans are part of a citywide effort to make sure that we are having more granular plans for our neighborhoods and also putting them on a more reliable schedule so that we can be, kind of reliably planning our neighborhoods. And with that also will be coming park plans as well. And so we'll be syncing the park master planning process with the neighborhood and the area planning process as well. And so the Southeast Area Plan hasn't fully wrapped up. They're still in kind of the final design phases, and I'm expecting that to come before council probably late April, early May-ish for approval, and then from there, like I said, this is a decades long plan. Some of it is physically tangible things like amenities at bus stops, and some of it is larger ideas. We want to eventually see housing in this area, and so it's changes to our land use. And some of that will depend on property owners deciding whether or not they want to develop their land or sell their land or whatnot.
So when we look at kind of that Southeast area plan, and we can tie this back into Madison Metro, we think of corridor building. And right now, one of the ones over here, Cottage Grove Road, would be a corridor that we're looking at. What do you see as like the future of like the northern boundary of Elvehjem for us, in terms of what kind of plans? How does that start to develop? I know we got a question about it's slightly out of our area, but Royster Clark being developed and how that ties all into the future of the Cottage Grove Road corridor. Can you speak a bit to like kind of slightly microing the Southeast area plan of like what does that mean for a corridor like Cottage Grove Road?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to realize that just because it's not in District 16 doesn't mean that it's not going to affect District 16. Whether that is the Royster Clark, or whether it is housing developments kind of in the northern part of the city, kind of in Alder Fields district. The traffic from those, the services that are needed by those residents will impact our area. Some of it for the better, some of it for the worse. And so it's, about making sure that we are providing those services that we need, whether that is public transportation, whether that is changes to land use and zoning, and also making sure that we have, that we're not building, food deserts or childcare deserts when we're doing that, and making sure that we're, responsibly building some of these neighborhoods and making sure that they're connected to green spaces, public transportation, jobs, opportunities, all of that.
Is there anything just from your own, whether it's personal or as an elected official perspective, that you would love to see done with like a corridor like Cottage Grove Road? Like, what's kind of your image of something that would be really useful to have there?
I would love to see a stronger public transportation network going up Cottage Grove Road. Cottage Grove Road is a major artery, and it has a lot of room for growth, for housing. I would love to see more walkability for our neighborhoods in terms of some of those amenities. I think one of the biggest things that I hear on a regular basis from folks is that we need a community center on the southeast side of Madison, and I think possibly somewhere along Cottage Grove Road would be very ripe for a community center. Cottage Grove Road is also the barrier, so it might end up on the District 3 side, it might end up on the District 16 side, but that is something that I'm very much pushing for, is a community center on the southeast side of Madison, because I hear every day from residents that they need it. And that they want it, and they need that programming and that extra space. And I think I've heard it from some of the board members at the ENA, that it would be nice to have a community center where where you could host your meetings. I mean, Penny Branch is great, but I think we also need more.
I cannot confirm nor deny that I've said that to you many times. But and as someone who grew up in Heritage Heights and now lives in Elvehjem, either side of the tracks would be fine for me. But
Yeah.
the one of the other questions we get a lot, and this was kind of shined a light on thanks to an incident on Cottage Grove Road in Vernon a couple days ago, but is something that we hear about a lot is these kind of issues, whether it's with gunfire or that sort of thing. And in a repetitive manner, we've heard about apartments that are more in, I believe, in District 3, and I think a lot of people just kind of get a frustration of like this is happening. What is anybody doing about it? And just kind of I know we can't speak about specific incidents, but like what would you tell people who are just kind of getting frustrated with these reports and going, what's going on? How are we going to deal with this?
Yeah. I mean, I feel folks when they say that they are getting frustrated or that they're scared, because they are hearing reports of violence. Some of the worst days of this job have been when there has been a shooting or when there has been a homicide. It's when my phone rings and it's Captain Ed Marshall. My heart stops and for a moment, because I'm worried that it is going to be one of those scary calls. And I'm in very close communication with the Madison Police Department, and with our folks at Public Health. I meet on a biweekly basis with MPD. to be checking in on some of the properties that do have higher calls for service to make sure that, we're having regular communication between myself, the property management, public health, the police department, and making sure that we're responding and having a strong police presence when we do need to have that.
Do you think there are like workable strategies? I know some of it spills over from other places, some of it is just do you think there are ways we could that at the city level we could be addressing kind of root causes of this problem, or is it,
Yeah,
no?
I mean, we need to continue to invest in our violence prevention unit. We have seen that work paying off. We need to make sure that we continue to support stratified policing because we are seeing that it is working. And Chief Patterson has consistently showed data that shows that that is working. We also need to make sure that we're investing in traffic safety and starting to have those conversations about what do body cameras for the Madison Police Department look like? What does a test team or traffic safety enforcement team look like for the city and expanding that potentially? And these are conversations that we are going to definitely be having as the budgeting process continues. But we also do need to make sure that we're addressing the root causes through our investments in our violence prevention unit, through building affordable housing and making sure that when we do build it, it is connected to those extra services, and that we're not just plopping it in the middle of a field and then saying good luck. We need to be responsible with where we're building that housing, and we need to continue to make sure that we're making those investments in all of our services.
So from another on a tertiary law enforcement is that there has been no shortage of questions, especially due to what happened with our neighbors to the northwest in Minneapolis, about Madison's reaction to the current state of immigrations and customs enforcement in the United States. How have you seen that in the conversations at the Madison level? What kind of recommendations do you have? And also just how do you think as you're going to kind of engage with that as the next 2 years likely do not see it go away?
Yeah. I hear from residents on a daily, weekly, if not daily basis, about their concerns about ICE in our communities, and how the city is going to respond and protect our immigrant neighbors, and make sure that we are protecting everybody. And I am in very close communication with the mayor's office, with the police department, and also with our partners at organizations like Voces de la Frontera, the ACLU, Centro Hispano, to make sure that we are coming up with a community strategy to make sure that we are alerting folks to when and if there is ICE in Madison. And I would say I would encourage folks to subscribe to my blog, that I do put out on a fairly regular basis, pretty much every other week at this point. And that'll be one of the fastest ways to get updates and alerts on what is happening with ICE in our communities. But I want to make it abundantly clear that we stand with our immigrant communities in Madison, and that we will work to make sure that they are safe and that they are protected, and that we will have a plan and we will be ready to respond should ICE decide to come to our communities.
And how do you kind of navigate that? Like again, this is back to that we can only do so much at the city level. And how do you kind of in your role as an elected official beyond just being a human, the when you're trying to find that line in ways we can do that, how have you kind of had that experience recently of like what do I do at the city level with issues such as this that get much larger than just manhole covers and trash cans?
Yeah. It starts with those conversations. It starts with sitting down with people on a one-on-one basis, and understanding what are all of the moving parts that the city has, whether that is working with the police department, whether that is working with the community development division, or whether that is working with our nonprofit partners, and also meeting with the communities that are going to be directly impacted and making sure that they also have a voice, and a seat at the table. It's and some of these issues, they're bigger than just the city. And so it's making sure that we're also connecting with our neighbors, which is frankly the best part of this job. It's been one of the joys of my life to get to meet so many people in the community, go to all of these public events, and get to also see our neighbors connect on a one-on-one individual basis. I love to see that. And I think that's one of the best ways that we as a community can kind of come together and prepare is getting together and meeting our neighbors one-on-one, knowing who needs help in the neighborhood, knowing who needs support. Does somebody need groceries? And also saying hi to your neighbor when you're out mowing the lawn or shoveling the sidewalk. Although I really hope we're done with snow for the year. Knock on wood. Pretty tired of the snow.
I put my snowblower away, so the next one's my fault. When we get a blizzard next week because I put it in the back of the garage. As we start to look ahead, we've got just a little bit of time left. As we're starting to look ahead to 2026, there's always things that are coming online in Madison. We actually got a couple of questions about one of the most famous things that is eventually going to happen in Madison, and that is the Madison Public Market. So, just the first, somebody just wondered where are we at with that, and like I believe it. If it's not open, I know it's relatively soon, but
Yeah, the public market, I believe, is slated to like we're going to have a soft opening, or there's going to be a soft. Shouldn't say we. There is going to be a soft opening. I believe in April, maybe early May. I want to say there's 12 or 13 of the 33 vendor slots have been filled, and they're working on the build outs for those. I kind of walked down there and looked through the glass a little while ago, and you can see that the build out is starting to happen. And then, I think we're hoping to have or a public hard opening in kind of the mid to late summer. And that'll be, hopefully fully open. And I think, we have some really exciting businesses. Melly Mel's and the Chocolate Shop are both going to be opening there. And I'm excited to see kind of what are the other vendors that we're going to have in the public market.
and as we look at 2026, the remaining 9 months of it, can you describe anything you see coming up? Maybe if it's exciting like that, or maybe if it's just something notable as you start looking at what is going to be taking your attention for the rest of this year. What's the kind of stuff that is either exciting you, kind of maybe even giving you some anxiety, but the kind of stuff that people should know is coming up?
Yeah. So we're starting the budget season. And so I would encourage folks to please send me your thoughts on what you would like to see in the budget. That budget process will run through late October, early November. And so I want to hear from folks. And I'm looking at ways of trying to engage folks. On the budget process, I do host regular office hours at community locations kind of across the city. I've been really working to make sure I have a Facebook presence and also using my blog. So please do reach out and send me your thoughts and your opinions on the budget. And I'm also going to be looking at, are there other community events? Can we do a budget listening session? Is the city going to be hosting other budget listening sessions to really kind of engage in that? And so that's going to be a good chunk of the year is going to be the budgeting process. I would also say Stoughton Road and the redesign of Stoughton Road is going to be a really big one. Trying to make that final push to make sure that it is safe and accessible for all of our users, whether you bike or whether or not you drive. And so that is going to be something that's happening and going to be taking up a lot of time as we kind of head into summer here as well. And I know that the Elvehjem Park is going to be soon going through another master planning process. And so I'm excited to engage in that and dive into that. And then we're still working on the intergovernmental agreement with the Village of McFarland, which is a very unsexy process, but it is one of those things that is time consuming, and it does involve a lot of engagement by the communities both in Madison and McFarland. And it's a really important piece of a government tool, but like I said, it's not that, big sexy housing project or transportation project, but it is a key aspect of our government.
And how much, kind of just on that note, as you go into your second year, um, how much of that this is where my time goes. Like, where do you take the moments of I'm in this intergovernmental process, I have all this budget stuff. Do you have anything just on a fun note where like that's the one you said sometimes it's meeting with people? Is it the kind of like pet project, the fun like side
It is.
idea? Would you have anything like that where it's just like this is the star on my Christmas tree as I
I really love engaging on Stoughton Road. It is a project that really draws a lot of differing opinions, and it's a big puzzle. And it is one of those projects that's not black or white, it's very gray, and making sure that we're meeting the needs of everybody. And I really enjoy that. But I think the best part of this job, like I said, is getting to work in the community and go to the neighborhood meetings or go to the neighborhood festivals or do office hours. I love doing office hours because we have so many great people who, they either choose to come by or if I'm, sitting at Twisted Grounds with my office hour signs, they'll stop by and they'll sit down and they'll tell me about something that's either bothering them or that the city is doing really well. And it's been wonderful to sit down and talk with folks about what the needs of the city and the neighborhood are. And I think that's the star on my Christmas tree is really getting to engage with the community. And I'm always happy if folks want me to come to a backyard barbecue or to your neighborhood meeting or to whatever. Like I'm always happy if I'm able to make it to try to come to those community events. I think it's really an important thing that we get to do.
And on that note, if just to make sure people know if they had a topic that they wanted to engage with you further or something we didn't cover and wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, so I actually have a set of office hours upcoming this Saturday from 9 to 11 at Twisted Grounds Coffee on Cottage Grove Road. I'll be there for a couple of hours. If folks want to stop on by, please do. You can also email me at district16 at cityofmadison.com. That's a great way to reach out to me. I also do have an official District 16 Facebook page. I should know the name of it, but I think it's like Alder Sean O'Brien, comma District 16. And you're welcome to reach out to me there as well.
Excellent. I hope we get plenty of people heading up the hill to say hi to you at Twisted Grounds. We do appreciate you being here, Sean, tonight, Sean. Thanks for spending the time with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And like I said, please don't ever hesitate to reach out. I love to engage with the community and folks and have more conversations like this. So thank you.
And on that note, for those of you watching, whether you joined us on the Zoom or watching us on our Facebook page, we appreciate you coming to just spend some time with us and listen about things that matter to us here in the Elvehjem neighborhood. And if this was the kind of thing that you're really happy we did, please reach out to us and let us know because we want to find more ways at the Elvehjem Neighborhood Association to be able to bring events from the bigger ones we do that you all know. The Easter egg hunt's coming up next in just a week and a half, so get your kids ready for that. But other things we can do like this, we would love to do. So please let us know if you enjoyed tonight. If you've got other ideas, we're more than happy to listen to them. And the one thing I'm going to leave you with is this was placed in place of an election forum because there is an election on April 7th. And it is, like them all, an important one. The state Supreme Court is on the ballot. The school board is on the ballot. You can vote for Sean O'Brien if you so choose. There is a write-in spot. There are um, every election, as you get hammered in time and time again, is important. Early voting started yesterday. At the Penny Library is the closest one to us. You can go early vote. The hours are 11 to 7 weekdays, 10 to 4 on Saturday. If you were one of those people like myself who requested an absentee ballot, we would really recommend putting that in the mail as soon as possible just to ensure it is received. There's also a drop box next to the fire station, catty corner from Culver's, off on our much talked about Cottage Grove Road. And of course, you can go April 7th to vote in person. If you want to double check your polling place, go to myvote.wi.gov. That'll have all the information, including where you vote, who is on your ballot, and all the other options. But do go vote. We're learning every day how important each and every role, from our alders to our school board, all the way up the chain, is to just our ability to operate and how things happen. So I highly recommend you do that. And again, thank you for a shout out to Dan Collins, the president of the board, who's been running everything in the background for me. And again, thanks to Sean for joining us. I'm Pete Schramm for the Elvehjem Neighborhood Association. Thanks a lot and have a wonderful week.
Have a good night. Thank you.